How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another Web Dev Junkie video. My name is Cody Seibert, and in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to build or replicate a site that I found on the Squarespace site. So if you go to Squarespace, then go to /template, there's like this little site where you can help like search through templates, I guess. And we're just going to try to replicate that using only HTML and CSS to get a little bit of better practice and understanding of the basics of HTML and CSS. So let's just go ahead and dive right into it. So I'm going to scaffold out an index file. So inside of VS Code, if you do an exclamation mark and press enter, it'll scaffold out an HTML file for you. And I'll say like HTML CSS practice could be the title of our thing. And looking at this little template here, you can notice that there's like a header here that has an icon to the left and some font to the right. So let's start by trying to build that out. So inside the body, we could use a header tag. There's a ton of different, HTML5 tags you can use, and header is one of them. So let's just go ahead and try to use that. And inside of that header row, I guess you could say, there's something to the left and something to the right. So inside of HTML, what you could do is you could have two divs. And for instance, we could say left and right. And if we save this, refresh the page, notice that these are stacked directly on top of each other. So we got to use a little bit of styling using CSS to get these to properly like be to the left or the right. And there's various ways you could do this. You could use like flex box, or you could use just floating and margins and absolute positionings. But what we're going to be doing for this particular instance is I want to just set the header to be a grid type of CSS grid, or display type. So I'm going to say display grid, and then you can say grid template columns, and I could make that 2 columns. So now what that does is basically applies the grid type of display to this header component, and then any of the nested children are going to kind of get aligned with whatever template columns you provided. So that's a complicated way to say that we got a pretty much a row that has 2 columns in it, right? And that's about it. Now notice that the right div is kind of aligned to the left. What we want to do is just do Textalign right on that. So I could just add a class called link, I guess. So inside our header, I could say the link needs to be Textalign right. Sorry, dot link, because that's a class that I put. So I added a class dot link to it. And that looks pretty good. Notice that we could probably add some padding to the top and the bottom of this header in the left and the right. So I'll say padding left is 10 pixels, padding right is 10 pixels, and padding top is also 10 pixels. And there's a way to do this with just doing like the padding property. You could do like, I don't remember what the order is, but it's like left, right, top, left, bottom, or something like that. Anyway, I like to actually spell these things out. So let's just do that and see how it looks. For this icon, I'm just going to leave it as like something simple, like an S, just because I don't want to actually take Squarespace's icon and get in trouble. And we're just trying to clone or get the things as positioned as possible. So anyway, this is a button, right? This, you can hover over it and your cursor becomes a pointer. And in terms of accessibility, you should probably either use a button or a link. So I'm just going to go ahead and set this to be a link. So instead of just saying right here, what I could say is make it an A tag, make it go to nowhere for right now, so href of pound. But notice when you add that, the style is going to be like an actual HTML link, right? So we got to change the style on this a little bit. And before we do that, let's just put this I'm just browsing. Okay. The font size is a little big, and we got to get rid of that underline in the blue color. So let's just go back to this link. And we can say that text decoration is none, so that will remove the underline. I could just set it to color black and then refresh the page, and notice that it looks just like a normal piece of text that has no hover behavior. So this is kind of exactly what this Squarespace template page looks like. And it looks like the font size is a little bit bigger on mine. I guess that's okay. Again, there's going to be discrepancies because they're also using a custom font family, which I'm not going to grab because I think it's their own like proprietary font. So Let's just move on. Notice here on this page we have a header, so that's pretty easy to add in. I could do like an H1 and paste in that text, and we get what's your site about. And I need to put that outside of the header, so let's just put that down here. Refresh the page. And first thing you'll notice is that the bold is a little bit much on our site, and it's also a little bit larger. So in our style sheet, we could just make the font size a little bit smaller and the font weight smaller. I'm not sure. We'll have to play around with this to see what works best. That's way too small. And you might say, well, why don't you just use your inspect Chrome console and change stuff to figure out a good combination? And you know what? That's actually a good suggestion. So let's go through here. And first off, you'll notice that there's probably a lot more padding on the header. So let's just move that down. And just to play around with that, we could say, or I could do margin. Margin bottom of the header, 20 pixels. Definitely not enough. Try 30 pixels. That looks a little bit better. So on the header, we're going to say some margin bottom 30 pixels. And I'm going to go ahead and wrap this whole piece of content in something called like a wrapper so that we can add padding to the left and right. So let's make a style called a wrapper. I'm going to make it called content. And I'm going to do some padding to the left, 20 pixels, and padding to the right. And again, this is just so that we can like wrap all of this like text content and buttons inside some padding. So content, it would help if I spell it right. Okay, so that looks a little bit closer. I think the weight probably could be increased to make it a little bit more bold. 500 maybe. I don't know if that's actually changed anything, but that looks a little bit closer. So let's move on. We have another piece of text here that you could just use like a paragraph tag and style it a little bit if you want to. And again, while I'm doing all this, if you have suggestions of a better way to like put these elements on the page, be sure to let me know. But for right now, I'm just kind of doing whatever works temporarily. So anyway, you notice here there's a little bit less padding between these elements. So I could probably reduce the margin of this. So on side of the H1, margin bottom, let's just do 0 pixels and see what happens. And it didn't do anything. I think you could actually do like -10, but I don't know if that's a good suggestion. But, let's just make it -6 right now. And a better solution is you probably have a bunch of H1s in your application. So it might be a better idea to like actually give this thing a class. But since we're just playing around and learning, it's not that important, especially if you're using like view and you have scope styles or something like that. Or if you actually have like a designer provide you with what your style should look like. But, we're just trying to learn here. So let's just go ahead and move on. So now to the fun part. We have these buttons here. So let's try to add a button. So I'll just add a button and I will give it the text of fashion. So now that we've added that button, if I refresh the page, you'll notice that that button looks pretty bad, right? So let's try to style it to make it look a little bit closer to this concept that we're trying to duplicate. So first off, you'll notice that it has more padding inside of the button. So we could just go ahead and add some padding. I'll do like 10 pixels and see that's a good starting point. And that looks okay. The background color is transparent over here, like it just goes right to whatever the background of the site is. So I could say background color is red and blue, and make sure you give it a 0 for your alpha. And that'll make your background color transparent. Looks like it has a border that's gray, so we could kind of change the border of our button to be something else. So I could say border 1 pixel solid, and I'll pick like a gray color and see how like I don't know, F3 looks. And that's way too faint, so let's do EEE. And that looks a little bit better. Same thing with the text, right? You could just change the text to be some type of faint color, so maybe DDD, and see how that works. That's not good enough. A. Okay, so A looks pretty good. Yeah, I think the border is lighter than the actual like color of the text. Okay. So one thing you'll notice is when you hover over the button, it changes the text color to black. So how do we actually do that? Well, we have the ability in CSS to add, I don't know what these are called, like functions or extra properties. I guess I could Google that, but it's just like an additional like event that your CSS listens for. So whenever you hover over your button, you can change different styles. So in this case, we want to make the text black. So if I hover over this, notice that the text becomes black. But you'll also notice in the Squarespace template, it kind of transitions slowly to black. So what we want to do is add a transition to this button. So transition, and we can say color, and then give it a half a second for it to kind of change colors. Okay, so you see how it kind of slowly goes to black now? It looks a little nicer, a little bit more fancy. And then you'll also notice that when you hover over this, there's no cursor change. It's still just a pointer, or not a pointer, it's still the default, but we want a pointer for obvious reasons if it's something you can click on. And then secondly, when you click on the button on this template, it makes the outline black versus ours has this blue outline, which is not that nice. So I'm gonna say outline none, and that'll get rid of that built-in browser's outline ability. But then you also want to make it so when the button is active, so you know how you have these different properties down here. Another one you can do is active, or maybe it's focus. I think we could do focus. We could do a border 1 pixel solid black. And refresh this page. Now when we click it, the button is now black bordered. In fact, the text should probably stay that too. So I'm going to go ahead and make the text also remain black. So if I click it, it stays that way. So let's go ahead and grab all these buttons and just try to make sure we replicate it as close as we can. Again, there's going to be some differences between all what we're doing and what is there, mainly because of I don't want to take their logos and their fonts, but you could also spend tons of time trying to match stuff, right? Like it's I've spent hours just messing around with CSS to make it look nice, but at the end of the day, if your client isn't going to notice the difference, then what's the point, right? If no one's going to notice that you use a gray color of EEE versus a gray color of E2, 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 then it's probably not a good idea to waste like 30 minutes of your time seeing which one looks better. But what I'm doing here is I'm holding down options and I'm clicking to do a multi-select cursor. So I could just pretty much convert all of these to buttons. Oops. Okay, button. I sometimes hate autocomplete. It's really annoying. Cool, so now we have all of our buttons. It's kind of annoying how I can't scroll down anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of fake stuff to the body and just say like the height of the page is 800 pixels. And that's just so that we can actually scroll down and see more. So I can go down. Okay, so one thing you'll notice on the left is that the buttons have some padding between them or some margin between them. Top or to the right and also beneath them, probably 10 pixels. So we can go to the button style and say margin bottom is 10 pixels and also margin right is 10 pixels. Save it, refresh, and it looks a little bit closer to what we are trying to achieve. I'm just going to close this right now because it's kind of getting in the way. You'll notice that we're a little bit off on some things. Maybe the font size is a little bit bigger. So maybe I'll do 14 pixels and see if that makes stuff a little bit bigger. They might have more padding. So it looks like padding to the left is maybe 14 pixels or something. Okay, so that's a little bit closer. Notice that the buttons are still lining up. Consulting design, interior design, jewelry, politics. So those all line up. So we're closer, but I don't think we're there yet. I think there's more padding to the bottom of these buttons. Again, you could spend all day doing this. These little tweaks. That's too much. Let's do 12 pixels. Anyway, let's not waste time. Let's move on. So down here we have, it looks like a label and then a input box. So let's add a label. It might just be a span. I'm not too sure, but I'll just do a label. And I'll add the text. So when we try to look at it, we have our text here. It's aligned as a display inline block element. We don't want that, right? So we want to actually make it act like a div. So it's on a new line itself. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and put that label selector here and say display block. And again, let me stress the fact that like in a real production code, like you'd probably use classes for styling a lot of these things. You want to just style the label and make them all display block, right? Unless that's the actual design you're going for your entire site. But we're just trying to learn different styles and properties in HTML tags. So don't roast me if you see bad code. So it looks like the color of these labels are a little bit darker in terms of like the grayness. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to A. That's not good enough. Do 9. Let's see. Nope. You might say, well, why don't you just inspect the left page and like look at what the colors are? Because we're trying to do this just by visually inspecting, because that is a great way to practice. So we need to add some margin between this buttons container, which we haven't created yet, and the label. So let us wrap all of these buttons in a div called buttons. And then we could just go ahead and add some margin to the bottom of buttons. Margin bottom, I think it's like a 20 pixels. Let's see. That looks pretty good, I guess. So we're kind of getting there. Next is the input box, right? So we need a input box which has a placeholder that says something. Describe your site, ... So describe your site, ... And if I refresh the page, notice that we got a really ugly looking input box. So let's go ahead and add some padding top, bottom, and left to this. So I'll go to input, padding top, 10 pixels, padding bottom, we'll keep it 10 pixels, and padding left, maybe 5 pixels, and see if that looks a little bit better. I think it does. I think the font inside of the input box is bigger, so I'll make it a 16. That looks okay. The label needs some margin, so I'll say margin bottom of, I'll do 8 pixels. Kind of looks close. I feel like it might need to be a 10 though. Sometimes good just to keep the like powers of 10 or something. Okay, I think there's more padding on the left to right. So I'm gonna say padding left is 8, padding top and bottom is 12 and 12. I think that looks closer. It also looks like there's like a set width to this thing, right? So I'm gonna say width of 300 pixels and see if that gets us closer to what we want. And that looks a little bit better. Notice that there's no border on the one to the left, but there is on ours. So, I mean, obviously you just go here and you say border none. And that fixes that issue. But when you click it, you still get that blue outline, which is not nice. So I'm going to say outline none. And now you can click it. The background color of this, right? So background color, it's a gray. We'll start with something in the middle like 999, and that is, whoa, way too much. So let's try D's. Still way too much. A, B, C, D, E. All right. I got to recite the alphabet to know what comes next. So that's close. I mean, the still looks way darker. So I don't know, F5, F5, F5. And then it looks like the color is actually like a grayish on the text itself. So I'll do like a B here. You know what? Changing the placeholder text is actually, the placeholder color is actually something different. I don't know what the style is. So if you want to tell me what that is, feel free to. But the color of the actual text when you type is black. And then also when you click this, you get a black outline on the bottom, or a black border. So I will say border, actually I'll say input focus, border bottom is 1 pixel solid black. Okay. So now when you click it, you get a black border. Doing a transition for the border is not as easy. They might be using like their own div or something, but for some reason, if you just try to do a transition on the border bottom, it won't actually work. So if you have a suggestion how to do that, feel free to let me know. All right, so we're on the home stretch. We just got 2 buttons down here that we got to work on. We got skip and next. So Let's just move on and make some more buttons. Down here, I could say, give me a button that says skip and a button that says next. And we want to make them align to the right, I believe, and we probably want to wrap them. So I'm going to go ahead and put a div called like class navigation. And we could just go ahead and move these bad boys up and make a class that styles those. So I'm going to say dot navigation, Textalign right. And that puts us in a better position. And notice that there's some, I don't know, 40, 50 pixels between the input and these buttons. So I'm going to go to the input and say margin bottom 50 pixels and see where that gets us. Nope, I think it's like 80. That looks better. Now, you'll see here that the buttons we used are actually being styled to match these buttons. So it might be a good idea to go back and scope this button style differently from this button style. So I'm going to go back to wherever we have button. I'm going to move buttons up here. And I only want the buttons that are existing inside of that buttons class div to have all of this logic. So I'm just going to scope those buttons so that we don't overwrite the styles here. So we could do the same thing with the navigation buttons. So navigation button, and we can start giving those some style. So I think those have like a padding of 40. We're just going to play around with some stuff and see if we can, oh, that's way too much. Okay, padding of 20 maybe. That looks better. Same idea with like outline of none, border, none, background color, regular green, blue, alpha of all zeros. All zeros, okay. That'll give us in a better position. Cursor, we got to change the cursor to a pointer. Cursor, pointer, when we're kind of hovering over these things. All right, so one thing you'll notice is that the next button has a default background color of like a gray, but we don't have a way to actually select that one. So let's add a class here called next, and we should probably just add one called skip here so that we can style those individually. So I'm going to say navigation, next, and navigation of skip. And it helps if I put those in the same order they appear on the page, just so I remember and don't screw that up. So for the next one, we have a background color of some type of gray here. And that's probably too dark, so I'm going to go back to like DE, see if that helps. I think that looks kind of close. But you'll notice that the actual color of the text inside of the button is grayed out, so we could do that. And I think it's disabled. I don't know if you could just put, maybe you could just put disable on the button itself, so disabled. Notice when you hover over this, it has like an X over your cursor. It's not disabled. I forget what it's called. I think you could say like pointer events none. Pointer events none. Maybe that's how you do it. Nope. Huh. Well, I'm sure it's a simple, silly little. I thought it's disable. Is it disable? Disabled? Disable true? Well, if anyone knows, let me know. They might just have some custom styles for when you actually haven't filled anything out. The cursor is like set to this cancel or no op cursor. But let's move on to the last thing. So this skip button here, when you hover over it, the background color kind of slides in, and we're going to try to get that close, but not necessarily 100%. So on that skip button, what we can do is give it a background image of linear gradient, and we can say to right, comma, we'll do like gray 50% and then white 50%. Okay. And that should make it go half and half. Okay. And we want the gray to slide in, right? So technically what happens is when you hover over this button, if we pretend that like the actual width of the background starts here and goes to here so that we have like all this gray hidden to the left of the button. We just want to slide that position in. So first thing we could do is we could just give the background size equal to 200% and 100% so that we have the ability to actually slide that in. And then we want to align it. So background position left bottom. So now it should be, let's see, maybe it's right bottom. Yeah, maybe it's right bottom. Okay, so now when you basically hover over it, actually let me do a transition all of 0.5. So when you hover over the skip, so navigation.skip hover, we want to change the position from right to left. And if we refresh this, it doesn't do anything. Did I mix these up? Maybe it's too left. I swear, I could have sworn this is how you do it. Background position. All right, I have to refresh my knowledge. So slide in button background. There's no shame in looking stuff up, right? In Stack Overflow. It's the guru we all need as developers. Linear gradient. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Let me just go to this. Background size. Huh. All right, so I did find a Stack Overflow. Let's see. He used background position of 0, negative 100. Linear gradient to bottom. The red 50. Background position 1 second. Background size. So this is sliding down. Let me check out the demo. See, like I'm pretty sure transition. Am I doing that right? Transition all 0.5 seconds. Maybe that's the issue. I hope that's not the issue. And I'm pretty sure it's right, and then make it go bottom. All right, what do they got here? They got the size of 100% and 200%. Ours is swapped because we wanted to go left to right. They have a linear gradient background that says to bottom. Ours is going to say to right. And if you want the black to slide in, then you want to have it second. So we want the gray to slide in. So we want it second. And when we hover over the skip button, we want to change the background position. I mean, technically I could just do, I wonder if I could just do this. Negative 100%. Let's see. I'm pretty sure I've done this before, so I don't know what issue I'm running into. Oh, hold on. Let me get this inspector going on. What's it caching my page? Did I not put the style on? What's going on here? Okay, I know I've done this in the past. I don't know why I'm running into so many issues right now. Oh, I know why. Navigation. This is the joy of coding. You miss something when you're typing and nothing works. Oh my gosh. Anyway, let's go back to what I was trying beforehand because I know this was working at some point. Okay. So I think I could say 2 left maybe to fix that issue. No. The 2 right, I want it to be... Oh no, I wanted to just switch these. I'm going to switch it. So gray and then white. And then start at the right and go to the left. Bro. Oh my gosh, hold on. And now I'm just trying different stuff, which is not a good approach. And I think I left out a comment here, which is probably causing some issues. Okay, so we have the slide in the wrong way. I feel like what we want to do is swap these. And then we want to say right, and then we want to say left. Is that correct? Okay, that's kind of what we want, but the color of that gray is a little much. So I'm going to say DDD and see what happens. I'll do EEE. Alright, so for those who made it this far in this video, congratulations. We built a site that's not identical to what we're trying to build, but it's pretty close. I hope you learned a couple of new things, and you gotta see me get frustrated on why this dang skip background was not working. And that whole issue was because I forgot to put an I in navigation. So make sure you double check, triple check, quadruple check everything that you type, because if you mess up on one key, you're screwed. But yeah, if you liked this video, be sure to like and also subscribe to my channel if you want more videos like this in the future. Feel free to post an idea of a page you want to see replicated. These are actually pretty fun to do, just visually inspecting something and trying to build it up. And I think it's a great way to learn as well. So my HTML and CSS are not the strongest, as you can tell sometimes, but I really enjoy doing stuff like this. So yeah. Be sure to comment, like, subscribe, and thank you so much for watching. Again, this is Web Dev Junkie, and my name is Cody Seibert. Have a good day.